Hello, you lovely lot. How are you? Welcome to another episode of Haunted Histories. I know we've not done as many this year, but it's been quite busy, and I'm sure you'll agree that the caliber of guests I've got on has been something a wee bit different, and also something that probably a lot of the paranormal world don't tend to think of. And my guest for December is one that when she said yes to me a couple of weeks ago, I did make a woo noise and sort of, the punching the air sort of thing. And I was so excited because I love the way this historian talks, the way she comes across. I mean, she's got a PhD, so I'm nowhere near her, but we have a kind of similar ethos into how to explain things. And she drops a lot of F-bombs. And her name, it's the wonderful Dr. Eleanor Janega. Hi, Eleanor.
Hello. Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Honestly, friends of mine, I think it was a Paracon up in Leeds a few weeks ago, and I was checking my emails like somebody else was talking, and I was sitting behind my little stall with my books, and I was just checking emails, and you'd sent one through saying, "Oh, that sounds wonderful. Yeah, I'd love to do it." And my friend sat next to me, Helen, who probably will listen to this, saw me sort of punch the air in delight, and she's like, "What? What?" So yeah, it was. Have you done any other paranormal type podcast stations?
The closest thing that I have done is I have done oh gosh, this is so bad. Oh, the alternate one, the guy off No Such Thing as a Fish. He does not the cryptid one, but it's something like that. Damn.
Okay.
Okay, hold on, great. This is gonna be fun for you to hold on a second. Um da, 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 da.
But whilst you're looking, I mean, you and I have just been chatting for sort of 20 minutes, and you've got an absolute love for all things paranormal. So, and
I
with also the
do.
medieval side that you work with, I'm surprised not more people have approached you from my neck of the woods.
I really wish they would.
Okay.
Just
Well, put the word out, you'll be
putting
deluged.
putting on a sandwich board, because for me and what I'm interested in my spare time, the podcast that I listen to when I am allowed to have my own time, it tends to be paranormal stuff, ghosts in particular.
Mm,
I have less in interest in things like UFOs and that kind of a thing. I'm a real ghost first girl. That's
okay.
my thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Some girls are true crime, some girls are ghosts. That's just how it works, I think.
Well, like I say, you'll probably get deluged now. We'll make sure we give out your contact details because I've got friends who do podcasts who are always looking for good guests. So you've opened that floodgate now.
Uh-oh. Famous last words, isn't
You'll say, bloody Penny, I can't believe she did this to me.
it?
But for those of you who don't know Eleanor, and if you don't know Eleanor, why not? She is, I mean, you can tell she's not English, as you can tell by her accent.
No.
But we do allow her over here because she's got a good sense of humor. So she
That's
can
right.
cope with the British sense of humor. So it's okay. So they're saying that to all my American friends. I'm sorry if I'm alienating you all. I love you really. Um,
No,
but
all Americans in their hearts long to be the right kind of American who gets British humor, though. So that's important because if you say
where,
that, we'll all say, "Oh, she's not talking about me." You know?
whereabouts in the States are you from originally?
I am from Seattle,
Oh,
so the
okay.
Northwest.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I can't be places where it's not raining more than half the time. So, it's I prefer to be surrounded by damp at any given
So
time.
you feel
So
right at
it's
home. Right
I
at
do,
home.
I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do. I've been here 18 years now, so
Oh,
I'm
wow.
for all intents and purposes, I am essentially British, but I'm stuck with the accent, unfortunately.
I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't worry about it. I was in America earlier this year at a convention. I'm going again next year for another convention. I do go over there quite a bit. It's always East Coast though at the moment. I seem to go to sort of
Mm, mm.
Pennsylvania and all around that. Um, and but yeah, I love it, and I do. Yeah, I do think Americans love being able. Whenever I go over there, they're like, "Go on, be sarcastic, be sarcastic. I want to see if we can get it." And I'm just like, "Okay, I'll baby
Sarcasm on
steps."
command. Oh no.
Baby steps. I'll
Okay.
come in just nicely to begin with and then really throw it at you. But so Eleanor here is a medieval historian and broadcaster. Now her biog says she specializes in the concept of sexuality, apocalyptic, I can't even say it.
Apocalypticism.
That's the one.
Yeah.
The supernatural and the urban experience in the Middle Ages generally. That sounds
Hmm.
very fancy. I mean, name a place she's had work in it, Time, The Washington Post, BBC History, etc., etc. She's also the co-host of two podcasts, Gone Medieval and We're Not So Different. She's got a brilliant website where she writes the blog Going Medieval, which those of you who follow my social media pages will have seen me post the title of one of the blogs, which we are going to talk about. And the title of this blog was No, Bestiality Was Never Okay, You Absolute Rabid Weirdo. And I still think that's one of the best titles of a blog I've ever seen. She's also done loads of telly stuff, and one of the main things she does is History Hit. Now,
Mhm.
those of you who haven't watched History Hit, you can get it on YouTube if you can't afford a subscription. You can also get it if you've got sort of the Freeview channels on telly, they'll show some of them. It's well worth it because I like it because it doesn't seem to have the controls, shall we say, that many more mainstream history shows, and Eleanor's nodding,
Oh,
have.
yes.
And that's why I like it because they can the historians on it, and I'm still angling to get on it myself. They can go off on the sort of whichever way they want to go, and there'll be loads of names you've recognise as well on that show, and that's another thing we're going to be talking about as one of the episodes on those. So, Dr. Janega, how did you get into medieval history and what exactly is medieval history?
Great question. So, medieval, as a term, it is kind of Europeanist in
Hmm.
outlook because we tend to define it as beginning in 476, so from the so-called fall of the Western Roman Empire,
Hmm.
to it's a little muddy, when we decide that medieval is ending, because to a certain extent, it depends on who's asking and where you are.
Hmm.
So, for example, a lot of people, if you are working on Iberian history, will say, oh, well, it ends in 1463 when Ferdinand and Isabella get married and you have the unification of Spain. That's
Yeah.
an answer. If you are me and you do a lot of work on Bohemia, I kind of think that the kickoff of the Hussite Wars will
Hmm.
do it for you. So, 1430 or so, that's a real difference. As a general rule of thumb, however, a good answer is if you can see Protestants, you have gone too far. So
Okay.
the back end of it is, 1517, you're done. One of the general features of medievalness in Europe is that you've got the Catholic Church. And
Hmm.
granted, you do have the Great Schism in there when they break from the Orthodox Church, but you don't have other groups of individuals who have any power. So the minute you do, you're out of the medieval period. So it's about 1,000 years of history, give or take. It's rather a lot, but
Mm.
it's also something that people get kind of confused by because
Hmm.
no one ever gets taught medieval history.
Mm.
And that's kind of how I ended up getting into it. I was doing a lot of history when I was in high school. I knew I wanted to be a historian at undergrad, but I was looking at first into Chinese history. I was very particularly interested in it.
Wow.
But when I got to my university, however, the Chinese history prof was on sabbatical, so there were no Chinese history courses to be had, and
Right.
kind of on a whim, I took a medieval history course because I sort of thought, well, I've never got to do any of that before. And
Mm.
I immediately fell in love. There was no coming back. And I just really, really, really enjoyed it. And it was just kind of all down the hill from there.
Okay. Because there's three sort of elements to medieval, isn't there? High,
Mhm.
was it early, high, and late? Is
Yes, that's
that
right.
sort of how
Yeah.
it's split? Because to me, it sort of seems the easiest way to look at it is when the Romans started to fall away from it, and then it
Hmm.
ends kind of when the bloody Tudors took the
Yeah,
throne. And that's
absolutely.
kind of
Yeah.
how, when I was looking at the dates, that's kind of the two
Hmm.
bookends. Would
Yeah.
that be a
Yeah, I think that is the perfect way to do it in England, right?
mm,
Basically the minute there's no more Rome around to boss everybody about, it
mm.
started. And then yeah, certainly Henry VIII is a early modern phenomenon. Well, we could say that about him. the prick.
I was I was telling you how I called people assholes.
Mm.
He gets utter arsehole. He doesn't even just get
What
arsehole, it's utter arsehole. I can't
one of the
stand him.
worst men to ever walk the face of the earth, Henry VIII.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
his father, uh, uh, um, I,
Mm,
you know, what he achieved was quite impressive, really, considering what he started with. And but I still think his mother should have been queen, really. But
mhm.
that's by the by. But Henry the Eighth, he just, I genuinely, and I've spoken to Tudor historians, I can't find a good thing about a redeeming feature
No,
about him.
no,
Not one. Not one.
no. He should have been in jail instead of on the throne,
Yeah,
fundamentally. A terrible man with no redeeming features, the
yeah,
end.
yeah.
Completely. Yep, yep.
I mean, if anyone listening to this can tell me a redeeming feature of Henry the Eighth, uh, please do, because I genuinely cannot. He makes my skin crawl. He makes my
Ugh.
skin absolutely crawl.
And he's created so many problems, even just aside from the fact that, he's a serial killer who bankrupted the kingdom, and did a lot of stupid things. He also created so many problems for historians because a lot of the issues that we have with source survival for medieval documents are all down to
Mm.
him destroying the monastery. So thanks, Henry.
I mean, I
Great
can think
job.
one positive thing. There's one positive thing I can think of, and this is very selfish. But
Okay.
one of his palaces was in Chelmsford, Beaulieu,
Ah,
and that's literally a mile up the road from where I live. And when one of my son's schools at year six, I think it was, asked if I'd come in and do a talk on Tudor history, I was able to tell them about Beaulieu. And the school that is actually in there and has been for quite a few hundred years, ironically, a Catholic school, which I still find quite
ha.
amusing. Oh, yeah, yeah, it's quite good, isn't it? They actually let me go in and almost go sort of behind the scenes and get photos. And I've got a photo of an original Tudor rose in one of the
Oh,
doors.
cool. That's nice.
So
All right.
that's a that helped me because the kids were all like, Henry the Eighth came here? And well, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so I'll give him that one. But that's
Nothing else.
no,
Nothing else. No.
no,
Mm-mm.
no.
No.
So which is your favorite of those three periods then, if you were to pick one? Is it the beginning, the middle, or the end?
I suppose that I specialize in the end. The 14th century is my favorite century.
Hmm.
My joke is that I'm really interested in when things go wrong, which is why the 14th century, because this is when you have things like the Great Famine, you have the Black Death. And I think that it is particularly interesting because I think you learn a lot about a culture and society when they are under stress like
Hmm.
that. That really shows you what it means to be a person from that era, is seeing how they react to terrible situations. Having said that, if I was going to be sent back in time, if someone was going to wave a magic wand and send me somewhere, ooh, maybe 12th century. 12th century is pretty good. 13th century is pretty good. I get much more interested in things from the high medieval period onward, and especially from the 12th century onward.
Okay.
So I think that we are really cooking then in terms of philosophy, and intellectual history is really interesting. That's when we start with Gothic architecture, and I love Gothic architecture. So, the cities are back in the high
Mm.
medieval period, and I really like cities,
Hmm.
hence my interest in the urban experience. So, all the things that I really like kind of get off the ground again in the high
Okay.
medieval period. So I'm very interested in it. And I mean, no shade to the early medieval period. It is very interesting, but it's just very long time ago, and we don't have as many sources as I would like for it.
Mm.
So God bless everyone who's doing work on the early medieval period, but it could never be your girl. If I got something that I need to be able to read something in order to work. So yeah.
Why do you think I do the workhouse, the 1800s onwards?
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
so many records for me to
Loads.
look
Yeah.
at.
Exactly. It's a silly thing to say when you're doing medieval history because obviously, in comparison to modern, we have almost nothing. But
Yeah.
it gets easier and easier, doesn't it?
But a
So,
friend of mine, she did her bachelor's and her thesis was on Charlemagne. And I said
mm,
to her, "Oh my days, you wouldn't have had it." And she goes, "But that's why I liked it because there was such a lack of resources." She said, that's why I like doing it because and I was like, "Nah, that's not me. I'm one of those that if I go to a records office, And I say to the husband, yeah, I'll be there 3 or 4 hours. 8 hours later, he's ringing me, go, are you coming home? Oops. Because I just vanish.
Yep. Yeah.
But that's just me. But you're talking about the 14th century.
Hmm.
Somebody who I actually really look up to that is a bit contentious that I do. Pretty sure she was 14th century.
Okay. Who's this?
Isabella, She-Wolf of France.
Oh, I love Isabella. No,
Me too.
please. Isabella did nothing wrong. Isabella, well, except I think that she aggressively consolidated lands a little bit too much after her victory, but she was completely right. Isabella for Queen. I love Isabella. She's great,
Mm.
actually. So, yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think she's fab, and that's not really my period of history. But when I first was introduced to her, when I did a podcast on the castle where she lived in Norfolk,
Oh,
and I
yeah, Rising.
that's the
Rising.
one,
That's great. Yeah.
and I started looking into it. I was just sort of, she if she had been alive now, she'd have been a CEO of like a multinational billion-dollar company. She would have been running things. She
Oh,
was
yeah.
just, I mean, and that husband of hers, what an idiot. I mean,
Oh,
I
completely. I
kind
mean,
of feel sorry for people that they couldn't just openly be say, I don't want a wife, I want a husband. But he didn't really help himself. And then when you get people like the dispensers and everything else coming into it, and
mhm.
what she did to Hugh the younger, I was kind of,
Mm. I
for
mean,
those of
my
you who
thing
don't
is,
know, Google it. Google it.
Google it, Google it. I think we did a big section on this last year for Gone Medieval. Well, this year still, in the spring, where we were really looking at Edward II and Isabella, and it's a very interesting relationship because, as a general rule of thumb, Isabella was pretty chill with him being gay at first. She was like, "Oh, this is fine." She got on with his first boyfriend. She didn't have a problem. It's the
Oh,
second one.
Piers Gaveston.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah. It's the dispensers that's the problem,
Well, they
you know.
were a problem.
So yeah, so
I mean,
yeah.
I think Piers would have quite happily been the boyfriend behind the scenes, just
Hmm.
getting on with it. But
Hmm.
it, if it's true what they say that Hugh forced himself on Isabella and everything else, then he deserves everything he got.
That's right. That is
Mm.
right.
Mm.
So
So, like I say, if you don't know what we're talking about here, this isn't what the show's about. Go off and look at
yeah,
it.
sorry.
But it's all right. It's what I do. I love it. I love it. But she is meant to haunt Castle Rising,
Oh, lovely.
and you're meant to get a whiff of lavender if she's about, because apparently
Mm,
she used to wear a lavender, well, like as perfume, didn't they? A lavender, like flower pouches to smell nice, basically.
yeah.
And she is meant to haunt there, but none of this wailing, screaming, locked up in walls stuff that people put in the history, because obviously that didn't
That didn't
happen.
happen. No.
She wasn't bricked up there. But yeah, she's meant to actually haunt there, and that's how I sort of
Yeah.
started to find out about her 10 years ago. And I think she's brilliant. I
Oh,
think she
she's
was
so
absolutely
good.
brilliant. Mm.
Mm.
You and I, we agree on far too much. It's quite
Yeah,
scary.
this the audience is going to be like, and now they're agreeing again. Fantastic.
So, right, I'm going to be contentious now then.
Okay.
Why do you not like the term the Dark Ages?
Okay. I don't like the term Dark Ages because people who are not historians don't understand what it means.
Okay.
So, in the first place, people think the term Dark Ages means the medieval period. It does not. It doesn't. That's
Mm.
not what it means. The term Dark Ages refers exclusively to the early medieval period.
Okay.
We use it to mean a lack of sources,
Ah.
specifically in the early medieval period. And we mean that it is dark as in occluded. So we don't have a lot of sources, so we don't know what is going on there, and therefore it is dark.
Ah.
Non-experts who don't know what we are talking about think that the term Dark Ages means Middle Ages. It doesn't. It never did. That's not what it means. It doesn't mean that at all. No one ever used it for that. And
Ah.
they think that we use it to mean bad. We don't.
Well, that's what
That's
I
not what
thought.
we
I
mean.
always used to think it meant when I was younger. It
Yeah.
meant bad torture,
Bad time. Yeah.
murder,
Yeah.
rape, all
Yeah.
those horrible things.
And it is easy for people to think that because no one has ever taught medieval history,
Hmm.
because it's very complex.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to teach it to young children because it differs from place to place,
Hmm.
and there you need to have a lot of thought about the period. And so, because we do things like use the term medieval as a pejorative, right?
Hmm.
To say that if something is bad, oh, it's so medieval. The number of times I hear someone say something is medieval and it is literally early modern.
Okay.
It drives me insane. It's like even things like torture. Torture is much more prevalent in the early modern period than it
Mm.
is in the medieval period. The major form of punishment in the medieval period is actually shame, which you could argue is a form of torture, but the major thing that they will do is make fun of you, right?
Hmm.
Because community is so important. Murder rates are not any higher in the medieval period than they are at any other time. They are pretty consistently about what you would expect from any given period of time. Are there things like the plague? Sure, but there's the plague in the 17th century as well, and we
Hmm.
don't go around saying that it's particularly bad. We just lived through a pandemic ourselves.
I was about to say that when you think about
It's
like
like,
the flu pandemic of 1918, 1919, that's a kind of a
mhm.
plague. It's
Yeah.
may not be the bubonic plague or whatever, but it was a type of a plague that just wiped people out. Yeah.
hmm And, I think that it's a really difficult term because historians, we were using it to mean this very particular thing. And it was a technical
Ah,
term used among peers, which escaped containment. And it's now just completely misunderstood and
okay.
misapplied. So even if you see historians using the term Dark Ages now, what we're talking about is like, oh, 675 or something like that. The time when we really are sort of like, I don't know, we're really reliant on monks at
Yeah.
Iona. And it's a really difficult one because it's a real belief that people
Okay.
hold. It's very difficult to argue with people about it because they believe it to be true in their souls that the medieval period was a bad time, despite having done no reading on the subject, never
Yeah.
being educated on the subject, never opening a single book about medieval history in their lives. They believe it. And I think
Okay.
it has something to do with us wanting to think that we are better than people in the past. So it gives you a
Yeah.
handy whipping boy. So I really don't like the term because even, when I, say if I see people using it correctly, even if I say, Dark Ages refers to a lack of sources, not intellectual decline, they still don't even understand what that means. And they go, oh, well, why weren't there any sources? Because they were all stupid and they weren't writing it. It's like, no, that's not how source survival works. It's just that,
No.
like, it's just that the year 600 was a really long time ago, my
Mm.
man. Like, I don't know how to explain time to you. But, in a world where all of your lighting is done by fire, things burn down a lot.
Yep. Yep.
Every time you move house, I always say this is like, how you chuck out like all your old phone bills and things like that. Think about how many times that happens over and over and over again
Mm.
for thousands of years. It just happens, and that's how you lose sources. And it doesn't have anything to do with people being stupid, but we're really invested in the concept of the medieval period being bad, and it makes me sad because it keeps people from learning about it
Mm.
when it's this incredibly rich and complex period of history. And indeed, if you're interested in history, it's one of the really fun ones because everywhere
Mm.
is different, everything's a little bit weird. It's nice,
Yeah.
and that complexity means that people don't get to engage with it, but I would argue it means that they should. Because people
Okay.
are actually quite smart and they could handle it.
Yeah,
So,
I make a promise to you. Next time I hear someone say the Dark Ages to me, meaning just the Middle Ages and people being horrible and obnoxious and nasty, I will punch them for you.
thank you. I appreciate that.
I need one back from you though. As soon as you hear people
Absolutely.
saying the Victorian workhouse was awful, it was just a way to kill off the poor people and everything else, can you punch them back for me on that
I
one as
will. I
well?
absolutely will.
Because
I'm
that's
down
my
for
one.
it.
That's my one that I have a similar sort of, and I get the, well, why didn't people say how wonderful it was? Well, let me educate you on this. Most of the people going in were illiterate, which is why they, in the Poor Law Act, they stated that children were going to have 3.5 hours worth of education a day because that would get them out of the poor cycle. So why do you think they didn't? They didn't actually have tape recorders back then. They
Yeah, funny
couldn't
that.
do, funny that, they didn't have computers where they could like do a video. So why do you think there's no accounts on them going, oh, the
hmm
workhouse actually saved my life? It's basically an early form of welfare. Yeah. There was bad things
Yep.
happened in every genre, every era of history. There's been negative stuff. There's things that could be improved, but that's life.
It's true now.
Exactly. So that brings me on to one of my questions that one of my followers, listeners, a chap called Mark, who was very excited when I said I was going to be talking to a medieval historian. He actually asked, how would you define the medieval period, behavior in the medieval
Mhm.
period, and how has it influenced the modern era?
Oh, that Mark, this is such a good question, but it's also huge because
I did
obviously,
tell him that was a big one. He did
yeah,
apologize, but
yeah, it's good because as I say, what is true in 476 is not going to be what's true in 1108. It's not going to be what's
mm,
true in 1256. But what I would say as a general rule of thumb is we see over time a generalized process of Christianization in Europe. So if you aren't already Christian, and you're probably Christian if you're around in the Mediterranean world, that you will become Christian. That's one of the things that happens. The big holdout is Estonia, and
mhm,
they make it all the way to the 15th century. Good for them. We love that for them. Before they Christianize, but it's a process of becoming Christian. People live in a much more rural society. It's largely agrarian. An important thing to remember is that 70% of the European population during the medieval period are peasants.
mhm,
What I mean by peasant is farmer. Peasant just
mhm,
means farmer. It doesn't mean
mhm,
that you're poor. It doesn't mean that you're stupid. It means that you farm. And indeed, we know from looking at tax breakdowns and things like that, that within peasants, probably about 50% of peasants are kind of poor. That's for certain. But 25% or so are what we would call sort of middle class. They've got rather a lot of money. And another 25% again are exceedingly rich.
mhm,
So there's also a lot of meaning in terms of who can be what. It is a period of time which is characterized less by nation states.
mhm,
So here in the UK, it's a little bit different because you have your England, you have your Wales, you have your Scotland,
mhm,
right? But there's no such thing as Germany in the Middle Ages. There's no such
mm,
thing as Italy. There's no such thing as Spain. You have a series of duchies or city states that are all doing slightly different things. And that's one of the things that is so fun about it
mhm,
because, every 100 miles or so, you can have a different county that has slightly different laws or slightly different customs or slightly different ways of speaking.
mhm.
And that makes sense in a world where the fastest you can possibly move on land is 30 miles a day. It's much faster if you can take a boat, which is why the Vikings are very successful. But that means that things are really kind of tailored at a local level, which is pretty cool. So you have someone you can go yell at if
Mhm.
something goes wrong. Like it's pretty easy to go find whoever's in charge around here, right? You don't always have to go all the way up to the king. And that means that we do have different little customs that spring up in different places, which is quite fun. And also, language can be a little bit tricky because, so for example, if you look at records from Italy at the time, people in Naples are like, I just cannot understand what people in Milan are saying. That is another language, and I do not know what's going on here. Same thing in France, like people down south, they're speaking Occitan, they're not speaking French. Even the Normans have their own form of French
Yeah.
again, which is the kind that we then speak in England, obviously. And so you have a lot of linguistic differences, and that's interesting. But these guys are also really, really interested in classical literature, classical philosophy. That's what's really hot for them. They read a lot of Aristotle, they think about that a
Oh
lot.
wow.
They really like Plato. They like classical myths. They like talking about the Greek and Roman gods just as much as they like talking about King Arthur, who is may as well be, a classical myth to them. And they really enjoy, I would say, a very down to earth sense of human. You have never, these people love a toilet joke. No one in the history of mankind has ever thought a fart joke was funnier than medieval people. They're really,
Really?
really, oh God, they love it. They love it. Everything to them is just all like sex and fart jokes. I tell you what, medieval people would have loved Porky's, the movie. Like that's where their sense of humor is, right? So
Oh
they're
wow.
very matter of fact people, and I think that that's what's really fun about them. They're a really good time. I think one of
Okay.
the my favorite things about medieval people is they're really committed to having fun in circumstances that I would find it very difficult to have fun in because I'm a
Hmm.
very spoiled modern person.
Yeah.
Like, that's my favorite thing about them, I think.
Wow. So that actually kind of brings me on to one of the blogs she wrote, the one that has me in stitches. The bestiality was never okay. You absolute rabid weirdo. I've got to keep saying that title because honestly, was this genuinely a question that somebody sent you on
Yeah,
Twitter?
on
Really?
Twitter. Really? Really? Because this is the thing, is that the thing that people think about the Middle Ages is, oh, it's so air quotes backward
Yeah.
that then sure they were fine with you shagging animals or something when they are really, really not fine
So
with that at all.
this was the question that
Hmm.
Eleanor got sent. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because you can go and read it on her blog on her website, going medieval. Has bestiality always been historically so taboo? Why? It doesn't result in pregnancy. Did it result in diseases? Why did humans evolve to get so repulsed from touching genitals with other species? And there's some few other points. Um, Firstly,
Oh,
I mean, I know there's no such thing as a stupid question, but
but slightly, sometimes
um,
there is.
I mean, I would have possibly worded it in a way that I was quite disgusted that I was having to ask this question, but it was something that I've been thinking of. I mean,
Hmm.
I asked a rock musician recently if they had showers on their tour bus because I've always wondered. It was
Yeah.
a weird question, but I'd always wondered. She actually did come
Do
back and
they?
no, apparently not.
Ah.
They have a little sink, and that's why when they're on the road a lot, especially in the States, when they could be doing 1,000 miles, they have day hotels that they can go to before a show to freshen up and everything before the show.
Oh,
Exactly. It's
gotcha.
a weird question. It's probably not one a lot of people think of, but it was something I wondered. But I kind of was very apologetic answering it. This person seems to be quite shocked that having basically sex with an animal was seen to possibly be wrong. I possibly would have been reporting her to whoever the local body
I
was in her area, but no such thing as a stupid question. Um, your answer though, I can't read it all obviously because we'll take up the whole show. If people are interested in how Eleanor answered this, please go for it. Go and find the blog. In fact, I might even share it on my page so people can find the link and read it if that's okay with you, because I thought it was so good. And this is where I found it really interesting the way you were dropping in like names that most people go, like Saint Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, people like that that I've heard of, but I couldn't tell you what they wrote if
Mm.
I'm completely honest, because medieval isn't my specialism.
Mm-mm.
But it was the way that you dropped those in and then was sort of explaining how um Gerald of Wales was another one. How it's not a good idea or was not seen as acceptable. Even though
Mm.
people thought, and I'm going to do this not to annoy you, but the Dark Ages would have allowed everything and anything,
Mm-hmm.
debauched, whatever. Actually, no.
No, no.
Now, can you I mean, I've got an idea. I
Mm.
wrote down how I would summarize why it's no. Um,
So
why is it
yeah,
no
it's
in the summary? It's quite
a
simple why it's a
major.
no in summary.
Yeah, it's a no because you're not an animal. That's one.
Yeah.
Which is, obviously humans are animals, but come on now. Basically, part of the medieval way of relating to animals is that we are in a relationship with them to which we owe them something.
Hmm.
We have some mastery of them. Medieval people would say that God created animals for us to have dominion over, but that means that you also have to be nice to them because you're sort of their overlord.
Hmm.
In terms of a sexual consideration, the other thing is that we got to understand we're working with a Christian society here. And as far as they are concerned, the only acceptable form of sex is married penetrative sex for the purposes of getting pregnant
Hmm.
between a man and a woman.
Yep.
And that's it. And anything else is not acceptable. And it's definitely not acceptable when it's with an animal. So, for example, Thomas Aquinas is really down on this and says that this is kind of the worst thing you can do, right? Because the way that he talks about sexuality or sinfulness in general is that he says something is more sinful the less logical it is. So,
Mm.
for something to be perfectly sinless, and holy, I suppose is a better way of putting it, it's perfectly logical and it aligns one with God. There's no logic to having sex with an animal because if the purpose of sexuality is for procreative purposes, you can't get an animal pregnant or be impregnated by an animal. So therefore, it serves no purpose at all whatsoever, and therefore is the most sinful thing that you can do. And it's a subversion of the laws of nature as a result
Okay.
of that. So yeah, it's not always good vibes. If they catch you doing bestiality, you're going to get in so much trouble, and then also they're going to kill the animal at least in England, which I really feel like it's not the animal's fault. Like,
No.
why are we killing the cow over this? She didn't do anything. She was blameless. But especially in England, you'll see that the animal gets slaughtered and you get in a massive amount of trouble. What happens then can vary from place to place, but it
So,
can be anything from execution to branding. That's a big one, so that everybody knows that you're a cow fucker. Wherever you go, they're
or
like,
pigs
this
or
is Dave,
goats, you know,
or
we don't,
whatever,
yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, it basically it doesn't make any sense from the medieval point of view. Yeah.
Which, whilst it's a sort of a very religious, archaic view that you can only have a sex life to make babies,
Hmm.
it's also quite a modern view that animals should almost be respected.
Yeah. And
So that's quite an interest when it came to behavior. That's why I thought that was quite an interesting.
yeah, yeah. And it's an interesting one in terms of what the initial question is because they're like, oh, well, it's not like you can get them pregnant, so surely it's a have at it sort of
Hmm.
situation. And I find it really interesting because the medieval reasoning is actually the exact opposite
Hmm.
of that. So,
No,
and
I say
also, like, I mean,
enjoyed is probably the wrong word to use for it, but I found it very insightful and
mm. I'm out here
educational.
educating people.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on to another question I had, and if you've watched the History Hit episode on ghost stories in the medieval time, this will all been answered for you. But what sorts of ghost stories did they do ghost hunting in the Middle Ages? Did they go? I mean,
So
obviously they didn't have the gadgets that I would use, but did they believe in ghosts and did they go looking for them? And if so, why?
so they do believe in ghosts. When they go looking for them, it is oftentimes more of a literal hunt than we have.
Okay.
So one of the big ways that medieval people write about ghosts is as though they are corporeal, like they've got a body
Hmm.
and they can be touched. They can touch. They can attack human beings. They are usually not specters in the way that we think of them.
Hmm.
So, for example, Cesaric of Hesterbach, who is a Cistercian monk working in the 12th century in the German lands, he writes a series of miracles and he talks about all of these different ghost stories. And within those, we tend to see ghosts that will come back and they'll do things like pound on the door of the
Hmm.
house that they used to live in. They will sometimes leave warning signs outside it. They'll say, "Oh, I'm in hell, so I've left a bag of the food I eat in hell, which is a bunch of
Hmm.
toads and snakes, and it's a warning for people to know." So they can physically change the world around them. William of Malmesbury, who is working here, writes a really interesting ghost story where he talks about a actually it's not it is still Caesarea. Sorry, I was reading these earlier. Going back.
It's
Try
all
that
right.
again, Eleanor. Uh Caesarius of Hasselbalch also has a really interesting ghost story wherein he talks about a woman. You can tell she's very naughty. She's very naughty because she's the mistress of a priest. And right before she dies, she asks for a very nice pair of new shoes to be made.
Okay.
And then she says, I demand to be buried in the shoes. I love the shoes, must wear the shoes. So everyone says, okay. And they bury her. And a few days later, a knight is riding along with his squire and he hears this woman screaming and she's screaming and she's screaming and she's running and she runs up to them and asks for help. And he says, okay, draws a sword, draws a magic circle around him, and he grabs her by the hair to kind of try to keep her in place. And this terrible fiendish knight is running after her, but he's able to like grab this woman, grab her by the hair and keep her in place. But she's too scared of the person who is pursuing her. So she runs away
Mm.
and her hair is torn out and it's left with the knight. And the knight goes home and he says, look, everybody, I tore this woman's hair out. Oh my God, it was horrible. She was then dragged back down to hell by this terrible pursuant. So they go dig her up and they find there she is. And indeed, her hair has been torn out of her head. So medieval ghosts are oftentimes these figures that you can actually physically interact with and who can act upon the living. Quite famously, in the Byland Abbey ghost stories,
Hmm.
there are ghosts there that do things like rise out of the grave and attack their mistresses and claw their eyes out.
Hmm.
And there are a lot of these ghosts that come back from the dead in the Byland Abbey ghost stories, and they then have to be hunted down by the local community. So all the lads get together and they will seize hold of the ghost and they'll grab him and say, "Oh, in the name of Christ, I command you to stay here." But it takes like three of them holding him.
Mm.
And then they have to somehow or another exhume them. And I'm like, I thought you were holding him right there, bro. I don't understand how this works. But you oftentimes like chop off their head and then you go and you bury them in oftentimes a marsh or kind of a
Right.
watery place in order to get rid of them. So there is quite literal ghost hunting that happens all the time. Having said that, they also really have a desire to prove that ghosts are real. So, in the way that we go ghost hunting because we want to be able to say definitively, here are these phenomena that we can
Mm.
report on, you see in ghost stories this same sort of thing. So, for example, in the one Caesarius tells about how the woman's hair was torn out, everybody sees the hair
Hmm.
and then they dig up the body and then they prove it. There will often be named people who report the ghost stories and they'll say, this person said this, everyone agreed, this was experienced by this many people. So they often have a tendency to explain who saw what and when. But one of the things that's kind of tricky about medieval ghost stories is exactly the same problem that you have with workhouse documents and how people relate to those, right?
Hmm.
Because we only get to hear from a very small segment of society.
Yeah.
Most people in the Middle Ages aren't literate. More particularly, when we say literate in the Middle Ages, we kind of mean reading and writing Latin,
Hmm.
which is universal. Writing is incredibly difficult with a quill. I don't know if you've ever tried it. So even people who can read can't always necessarily
Yeah.
write. If you were an incredibly fancy person, like for example, a queen, you don't write. You have someone who writes for you.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have a scribe.
You have a
So
scribe. Yeah.
we don't always get to hear from people just because an incredibly small subsection of society can read and write, which is also, I hasten to add, the norm
Mm.
across history. It's really only until the 20th century when literacy became universal. So we tend to hear from particular segments of society that reflect that. So, in particular, the church,
Hmm.
because everyone in the church can read and write. That's what
Hmm.
they're doing, right? Like
Yeah.
they are reading and writing Latin. That's what they're doing all day. They also have the money to keep documents that are written over time. Think about how much space you need to keep hundreds upon hundreds of years of books, right? So the church is an institution that can keep these things together.
Do you know what I'm going to come in with now?
Mm.
Bloody Henry VIII.
Henry the Eighth, I swear to you, I swear, like we lost so much. We lost so much under him.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, and that's like, see, that's the thing is like, if when people say, "Oh, Dark Ages," well, why weren't there any documents? Go ask
Henry
Henry the Eighth.
VIII.
Go ask Henry the Eighth where all those documents went, right?
Wasn't just wives he was destroying.
Ugh. And
Anyway.
and also you're not writing on paper at the time, you're writing on parchment, which is
Yeah.
animal skin, so it's incredibly expensive. There are
Mm.
all these barriers to it, right? So we don't always get to know what the average woman on your street would think about ghosts because we don't get to hear from her. And when we do get glimpses of those beliefs, that's what I think is most special. And the thing
Mm.
that got me into medieval ghost stories in particular comes from the autobiography of the Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV. He's the guy who everything in Prague is named Charles after. So, Charles Bridge,
Oh,
Charles
okay.
University, like Charles, that's him. And he writes a very boring autobiography about his young life in order to justify coming to the throne. And in the middle of him banging on and on about like going to besiege different castles, he tells a ghost story where he and his chamberlain are staying at a castle in Melm, I believe. And they notice that a cup of wine that neither of them is standing anywhere near picks up and throws itself across the room. And they flip out and they start screaming and praying and they wake everyone up in the house and they're like, come and look at this wine glass. And they say no one can sleep for the rest of the night because everybody's too scared. And I
Right.
found that really striking because to me, that's a very modern ghost story. You could
Yeah.
tell that now. But we never get to hear those ghost stories because it takes someone as important as a Holy Roman Emperor writing it down. And most of them don't write down a damn thing. Like he's a real outlier
Mm.
in terms of Holy Roman emperors. We just don't get these written accounts from average people very
Yeah.
often. So as a result, you have ghost stories that tend to more align with the interests of the people who are recording them,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. Instead of just, your kind of run-of-the-mill average ghost story that we would hear today.
Interesting. I mean, nobody's really ever written down like modern day, like modern historians have never. I don't know of any sort of books or whatever that talk about this kind of medieval ghost hunting. Is it
Mm,
something you're
mm.
working on at all?
Yeah, I'm currently in the middle of working on a book about the history of ghosts. So I'm going to be going outside the medieval period. I'm starting with ancient ghosts. So we're starting out in Samaria and we're going to get up to the Enlightenment because I can't be dealing with the Victorians, okay? There's
Oh, I
too
could help
much.
you with that.
There's too much. There's too
I
much. I
could help
can't.
you
I
with
can't.
that bit.
I, I was talking to another historian over in the States when I was at a conference last year, and she was saying that she was working on a history of seances. And she was saying, and then I started working, and there's just so much. I think it's just
Mm.
going to have to be the first 10 years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't. I don't have time for all of this. So, and I think that it is quite interesting to kind of see how attitudes kind of change around the Enlightenment and the way
Mm.
that we relate to ghosts. But it is kind of funny, like medieval ghosts and early modern ghosts, they have like certain properties that we don't associate now. There's not just the corporeality, there's also this thing where they're like, oh, ghosts can tell you where treasure is. And I'm like, I don't know why. I'm not exactly sure why it is that dead people know where treasure is, but they do. And there happens to be this really funny thing in the 17th century in the German lands where because they're very German, if you want to go treasure hunting, you have to apply for a license, and that's fine. They'll grant you one if that's something that you want
Okay.
to do. But they'll say to you, "Did a ghost tell you where that treasure is?" And if you say yes, they're like, "You can't have one because ghosts aren't real and you're being very naughty."
Okay.
And if you say, "No, there's no ghosts involved in my treasure hunt," then you'll get your license. And
Interesting.
there are people like running scams on other people saying that they can talk to ghosts and that if you go dig here, like, oh, just give me some money and then I can talk to the ghost for you and the ghost will tell you where you can find infinite treasure and all these very, very funny early modern things happening within that. But yes, I'm currently working on that. I think it's supposed to be out in 2027. The working
Nice.
title currently is The Unquiet Dead.
Oh, I
So,
like that. I like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I mean, the thing is with it, what I was going to say is like the belief why ghosts can tell you stuff that maybe is going to happen or has happened is because they don't have time the same way that we do,
Yeah, yeah.
which is why, one of the theories that if you're doing an investigation, I don't know how much investigating you've done, but when you ask a question, you sometimes have to leave a little while for an answer because they won't be instant. But also, if you
Hmm.
pick up a voice on a recorder that you can't explain, you have to slow it down because it's like, "Rrr," and it's all because their concept of time is very different to ours. So technically,
Hmm.
they can see what's going on because they may have already gone through that. And but there's no, yeah, it's one of the things I've always had people say to me, can you ask the ghost what the winning lottery numbers are going to be? And I was like, no, I've never
No.
heard of that ever, ever happening. But then, it's quite I find it quite an interesting it was interesting and sort of thinking about it more like you say is a lot of the ghost stories were documented by monks and religious folks, so of
Hmm.
course the ghost stories are going to be, if you've been naughty you're going to be stuck in the afterlife.
Hmm.
Think of purgatory and everything else, but if you then do what we're telling you to do to fix that, you'll be
You'll be
okay and you'll
fine.
go to heaven. So it's
Hmm.
kind of almost like a societal control method.
Exactly.
But then it would make me interested. It's a shame we can't go back sort of 1,000 years or whatever and speak to Mrs. Smith who lived in the little cottage while her husband tended the farm and say, "Have you ever seen anything you can't explain?" But then again, to them, sort of like a comet would have been paranormal
Hmm.
to them because they
Hmm.
wouldn't have understood what it meant. So it's all very sort of I find it all quite fascinating and say doing the research for this, seeing how ghosts. I mean, one of the ones I found most interesting is what in the show you were talking about. You'd gone to Canterbury, obviously oldest
Mm.
cathedral in the UK in England,
Yeah.
and the fact that Thomas Becket is basically a ghost in one of the
Yes,
stained glass windows. And I was just like, that is so awesome. It's so awesome because if I say to a lot of religious people, ghosts, they're like, no, no, it's satanic, it's this, is that. Well, actually, no, one of your saints is a ghost in a
right there.
cathedral window.
Hmm. And
Yeah,
it's not unheard of either. Becket is one great example, but also one of the big Bohemian saints, one of the Czech saints, Saint Procopius. He's one of my favorites because his miracle, his first posthumous miracle, where everyone says, "Oh, this guy is clearly a saint," is that he'd founded a monastery, and after he dies, a bunch of German monks take it over, and he doesn't like that. He thinks Czechs should be in charge. So his ghost comes back and chases all of the monks out of the monastery. And everyone goes, "It's a miracle." And I'm like, "This is a ghost haunting a bunch of other monks." And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, a miracle, everybody." And that is just accepted as such. The word they use in the Latin is always ghost.
okay.
That is what they're saying. And the scariness of that, of this after death apparition is considered miraculous.
Yeah,
So I think it's just a different way. It all depends on who you're asking,
yeah.
right?
I mean, from a ghost hunting perspective, let's talk ghosts for a bit. I know
Yes,
you
please.
visited, okay, we will. You visited Chillingham Castle on that
Yes. Hmm.
episode. I must admit there was at times when I was sitting there watching it going, oh, for heaven's sake, because
Oh,
there is
girl.
there is stuff about Chillingham which is complete and utter
Yeah.
fabrication and
Hmm.
I've confirmed it, but they didn't like it. Um, but it's still meant to be a very interesting place to
Mm.
investigate. And I know loads of people that investigate it, and it's a bit like Marmite, I think, as a place to investigate.
Can I tell you my Chillingham stories?
Go on, please do. Please do.
Okay, so, I was there and, I like do my research and I'm sort of like, but I did want to stay. And we stayed overnight while we were there and we were all freaked out the whole time. It was great. But the thing that was most useful to me was actually I was talking to the woodsman. So ordinarily when you are filming at a historic property, there's going to be someone who's put in charge of you
Hmm.
when you're a film crew to make sure that you don't put a boom mic through
Yeah,
an old painting or something
yeah.
like that, right? And so ordinarily they have a caretaker who does that. In this case, she was off looking after her family. So her husband, who was the woodsman of the property, was looking after us. Big strapping guy around my age. He's got this really gorgeous mastiff that I was all over, and she was just a little sweetheart. And we were sort of packing up for the night after having finished filming at 10. And he says to us, "Oh, do you guys believe in ghosts?" And I say, "Yeah." And my cameraman's, "I don't know." And my producer, "No." And he says, "Yeah, well, before I moved here, I would have told you it was all a load of bollocks. Like, absolutely not true."
Hmm.
And then he just starts telling me all his ghost stories. And he lives, over in the wing of the castle where you stay if you're in holiday apartments. And he's like, "I've been out here at 2 in the morning trying to find the children that are running up and down the hallway. There's someone who plays the piano in the corridor here. The piano itself is completely out of tune, but like while they're having a dinner party in their flat, everyone can hear the piano playing in the hallway. And you can tell the difference between someone playing a piano versus like a recording. He's like, you can hear the kind of thunking of the
Mm.
keys and all of that. His dog sometimes just like growls at corners of the room. I overheard some of the staff who were working in the gift shop saying, "Ugh, they're terrible today. Every single time I turn my back, they're pulling my phone charger out of the wall. I just need a charge."
Yeah.
And it's those little things where I'm like, "That's the ghost." You know,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. But that's not sexy. That doesn't sell tickets. And so they lean into things like the witch and
The
the blue
torturer.
boy and the torturer.
I mean, that was one I got asked to look into, and I ended. It's about, gosh, about 10 years ago. I was asked to look into that, and I did have to speak to somebody who was a medieval historian who went through the I don't know, I can't remember what they were called, like almost like the employment records
Hmm.
for the
Hmm.
castle. And I said, "Oh, can I look at them?" And she goes, "Can you speak Latin?" And I went, "No." And she went, "I'll translate it for you." And there was no such person ever there.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, and it's things like that, but that's what upsets a lot of people because that's what they focus on because like you say, it's sexy and people seem to think you can only have a haunting if something really nasty happened in the place,
Hmm.
which is
Hmm.
utter tosh.
Yep,
It's
yep.
utter rubbish. Someone doesn't
And you
have to
could,
have died horrifically in a place for it to be haunted. It could have just been somewhere they really loved being and they've been pulled back there in the afterlife. I
and
mean,
they're trying to have so many named ghosts, and some of them are supposed to be happy. And then, so why do you need, I don't understand why you need all that,
no. I
but,
mean, the area it's in, I can see that there would have been quite a lot of upheaval with all the
there
borders
is.
and
Yeah,
everything
absolutely.
else.
Hmm.
Even my very basic knowledge of that period of history, I know it was pretty gnarly. But it's and I've never actually visited Chillingham. I haven't actually got around to doing that one yet. I'm a bit like when there's places everyone says, "Oh, it's the most haunted place in the UK." I'm like, "Yeah, I ain't going.
Oh,
I ain't
everybody
going."
always says that anyway. Like everywhere you go is the most haunted
Yeah.
wherever. It's always the
Um,
most haunted pub, the most haunted hotel, the most haunted castle. So,
my favorite location in the
mm,
UK is a
yeah.
fort in near Felixstowe called Langard Fort,
Ooh, okay.
and it was originally a Henry VIII. And I
Mm,
can
boo.
boo, but he built like a muddy bulwark thing. But it was
Hmm.
actually in the 17th century, a proper fort was built there. And it was the site of the last ever seaborne invasion of England in the 17th century. And for me, it's one of the most active places I have ever visited. And I
Really?
love it there. Absolutely love it there. But most people haven't heard of it
Mm,
because it's quite sort of it is quite out of the way. It's a bit of a pain to get to, even if you're in the south. But for me, and there's sort of fabricated history made up about it, but I ignore that. But I have had so many unexplained experiences that I will try and debunk until the cows come home, and I can't. But it doesn't get, and that's so I like those kind of places. I like the places that um people don't, shall we say, rave about
mm-hmm,
so much.
The quiet places,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, it's not quiet, but
Well,
it's not as
yeah.
publicized. But that's one that I tell everyone about. I'm like, look, if you want to go somewhere, we'll go there because for
Hmm.
me, that place, I had some friends come out. I think it was last year, possibly, and they prefer a fort that's on the other side of the estuary called Harwich Redoubt. They prefer that one,
Mm.
and I'm like, just wait. And at the end of the night, they went, "Oh my God, this place is amazing." And yeah, that's one of my favorite. But
Oh, that's
nobody
so
really talks
interesting.
about it. Nobody really talks about it.
Well, I'm going now. That's
Yeah,
not,
we go. Want me to take? You want me to
yeah,
take
I
you?
do. Yes,
Yeah.
please, Penny. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. I
When
definitely
I
want to go.
next time I know I'm going to be going there, I'll let you know. But it's huge. It's a proper huge. I mean, it's not even as big as it used to be, but it's
Mm.
got a really sort of. I mean, the thing is, its history is more so 18th century onwards. So
Oh, it's all, listen, I'll take a ghost where I can find them,
okay, okay.
fundamentally.
But what other places have you visited then that you've been told has got ghost
In
stories?
I've been to Pluckley,
Oh yeah, yeah.
which hilariously I just stayed there though because I was hiking through and I stayed in Pluckley for the night, and then afterwards people said, "Oh yeah, well,
The
so
Screaming
so
Woods. Yeah.
uh, nothing
Yep.
really came out of that so much, I would say. I have been to all sorts of places in York, so the Golden Fleece and that sort of
Hmm.
a thing. Now, I have another friend who he's a bit of a ghost hunter himself, and he and his husband were staying at the Golden Fleece for a bit of a laugh.
Hmm.
And they definitely did have some little phenomena happen. For example, like they were seeing their own light turn on and off when they were out
Hmm.
on the street and no one was in the room. Like it wasn't as though the cleaning staff were in there,
Hmm.
but they would see that the lights would change
Hmm.
and curtains would twitch about and those sorts of things while they were looking at it from the outside. And I thought that was great. I've never managed to have anything happen in there, but let's be so honest, I'm just in the pub when I'm there. So
Other kind
no,
of
nothing.
spirits. Other
Yeah,
spirits. Yeah.
no, it's not happening for me. I have done some mooching about also up in Edinburgh, like
Hmm.
in some of the crypts and things,
Hmm.
which to me do seem as though to feel as though there's something going on. But,
Hmm.
oftentimes in the circumstances in which you're able to go in when you're with like a huge group of people, it's just not going to happen for you, is it, babe? Like it's,
Well, you say that.
situational. Ah.
Before I really started getting into this, I mean, I've always been interested in it. I was probably in my mid-20s, and
Mm,
I'd gone up to Edinburgh for the weekend with a friend of mine. So I wasn't doing ghost hunting at this point.
hmm
And we went into, well, they call them the underground tunnels, don't they? But they're not really tunnels. It's a bridge that was blocked up, but the
hmm hmm
vaults.
hmm
And he was telling us and I felt someone touch, like touch my shoulder. I was right at the
Uh,
back, and I felt them touch my shoulder. And I sort of turned around thinking that there's someone appeared behind. There was no one there. And it was after then the guide said, "This is where so and so's meant to." He didn't know that that had happened to me. And afterwards, he said, "This is where," I can't remember the name of the person. I've got a friend who runs tours up there. He'd be able to tell me that touches blonde women on their shoulders and stuff. And I'm like, well, the thing was, he wouldn't have known I was blonde because it was absolutely freezing cold, and I had my hair up and a beanie on, so you couldn't
mm,
tell what color. And I had long blonde hair then, and so little things like that. And I'm just like, okay,
hmm
okay,
hmm
but it's never bothered me. I find it interesting. I'm not a screamer. I'm a if
hmm
I hear a noise, I run to it, not away from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I always laugh that when I take sort of male friends who've never done this before, and they'll be like, "Oh, you'll be screaming," and I guarantee it'll be you. It's always the
Mm.
men. It's always the men that scream and run. Always, always. Another place that if you've done Epping Forest
Ah,
is a
yeah.
good
Yeah, I've
one.
been to Epping
I,
Forest. Yeah.
I've written a book about it called The Elements of Epping Forest, and that one has got such a huge just the history of what forested. I mean, you'd know as a medieval historian what being forested actually meant. It doesn't
hmm
just mean
hmm
trees.
Yeah.
And that one has got such, and because it's so huge as well, that one's got that's a very, very active part of the world. Um, but yeah, it's all good. But what I think I want to round off on, if that's
hmm
okay with you, is
Absolutely.
witches. Because obviously it's something the
Ah.
paranormal world is very interested in. Now,
hmm
I get really, really irritated and I get into lots of arguments with people. And we'll talk about English witches, not
hmm
Scottish, not European, English
Yeah.
witches. There's
English.
a
Yeah.
reason I'm saying that. And they say they burned witches.
No, they didn't.
Mm. And I
They
will
hung
go,
them.
no, they put them in a noose. No, no, they burned them. There's accounts of them burning a witch. And I'll be like, no, they burnt that witch because under the Treason Act of 1351, she was deemed to have killed her husband using witchcraft. She was burned for murder, not for being
hmm
a witch. And
Yep.
this is a
And
very important difference. And I get into so many bloody rows with people about this. It drives me up the wall.
And also, it's ridiculous because you're going to take the one out of dozens, and that's the one that you're going to say proves the rule.
Hmm.
Even if you were to say, okay, yeah, sure, the reason they burnt her was because of witchcraft, which it wasn't, as you say,
Mm.
it's murder and heresy. But even if you were to, okay, well, there's another 80 over here who were all hung. So what are we
Hmm.
talking about here?
Hmm.
And I don't understand why people want it to be burning so badly, and as you say, we tend to see more burnings on the continent and particularly
Yeah.
in the German lands, and that is because again, it's not about witchcraft, it's about heresy.
Which is why I specialize
Uh,
England, the England
yeah,
witch laws. Yeah.
exactly. And so even then, it's like they're not. You don't burn witches, you burn heretics, and that's a
Hmm.
different thing, right?
Mm.
And so there is a very important distinction
Mm.
about what people are doing and why. Still, the number of witches who are hung versus burnt, it vastly
Yeah.
outnumbers the number who were burnt. It by a huge margin. So
Mm.
it's just a ridiculous thing to say, and I just don't know why people want them to be burnt. I don't
No.
get it.
No, but I've say I have had so many rows with people, and I've even specified I'm talking England here. I'm not talking about any other part of the world. They did
Hmm.
not burn you because you were a witch.
No.
And that was something else that I found really interesting. You did a Q&A on witches, and I found it really interesting because I never thought of it like that like this, that the witch laws came in post-medieval.
Yeah, the witch panics are an early modern phenomena.
Yeah,
They are not medieval at all.
no.
Very occasionally, you get accounts of witches, but you never have witch panics. You don't have
No.
people saying she's a witch, he's a witch, burn everyone, hang everyone, all of those things. Very occasionally,
Mm.
people get done, and when they get done, it's for murder.
Mm.
And it's usually said that they use some kind of a magical element. So, for example, we see this in Ireland. There's a couple of people who are hung, and sometimes ghost stories. So William of Malmesbury has the very famous ghost story, the Witch of Berkeley. Although I never know if you say Barkley or Berkeley here, because Americans say
Either.
Berkeley.
Either.
Yeah, so the Witch of Berkeley, but that's a story about a woman who was doing witchcraft, but then like lives a long and happy life, and then gets dragged to hell because she made a pact with the devil, but after her death, right? And
Mm.
that the church isn't able to protect her. The church tries to protect her. The church doesn't want the devil to take her soul. So
Mm.
it's not even a medieval way of thinking about it. And we do see, for example, in things like penitentials, which are essentially guidebooks for
Hmm.
priests, like where they say, when someone's coming to give confession, go and ask them these questions. And we will see, for example, in the penitential of Burkhard of Worms from the German lands, he says, yeah, ask women if they think that they go out flying on sabbats to go worship the goddess Diana. And he says, because they're deluded if they think that. And thinking that that is true, they're heretics. And you have to give them like, it's like penance. It's sort of like bread and water for a month
Hmm.
and you're very naughty and you can't actually do that. That isn't real. So medieval people don't think that's possible. And
Which is an interesting thing when you think
yeah.
what people think of the medieval. I mean, this is something that's quite close to my heart. I live in Essex. I'm from
Mm.
Essex.
Mm-hmm.
Essex is
Mm-hmm.
the witch capital of the
That's right.
county, and it always gets forgotten because things like Pendle
Yeah.
overshadow it. Now
Yeah.
we had more witches executed in Essex than Pendle, but people forget
But
about
they had the
Essex.
biggest family get
Oh.
executed in Pendle. Yeah. So, yeah.
But people forget about Essex and the fact that we had more. I think I did some research on it once from like the 16th century when the axe started coming in to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
bloody Matthew Hopkins and John Sterne in the 17th century.
Ugh.
Matthew Hopkins
Ugh.
is an a 17th century version of an incel. I,
Yep.
I, 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 I
Yep.
actually said that to Susanna Lipscomb on a course I was on of hers, and she went, "That's brilliant. I'd never thought of that." Well, he is.
It's
He is.
true.
He
He
hated
is.
women.
Yeah.
And everyone always forgets about John Sterne as well. They always talk about Hopkins and not Sterne, and they were bad as each other. But we had more people, predominantly women, tried and executed in Essex than I think it was Cambridge, Hertfordshire, Kent, and another county all put together. Yet nobody
Hmm.
ever mentions it. And there's people are starting to a little bit more now, but it's why it's not something I'm proud of, but it's like if you're going to talk about the history of it, talk about the history of it.
Absolutely.
Why
Yeah.
Essex? Why is it? And I always say you can't just blame the Hopkins Stern thing because they were 1600s.
They,
It was happening
yeah.
before that. But why Essex? Why were we
I
so almost victimized by it?
I think that it has to do with, so one of the big theories that we have about witchcraft, and one of the things that we tend to see is why it starts getting off the ground in the early modern period is due to the process of what historians call confessionalization, which is basically the invention of Protestants, right? And one of the big things that you tend to see is you see more witchcraft persecutions take places areas where there is conflict between Catholics and Protestants. So, for
Okay.
example, in Ireland throughout the entire early modern period, only like three people are hung as witches because they're like, yeah, we're Catholic, bro. I don't know what to tell you. Like they're not worried about it. You see way more people killed for being witches down in the German lands because over the border someone's Protestant or someone's German. And
Hmm.
Essex is a huge place where people are coming and going,
Hmm.
right? They're coming and going. They're going over to the mainland really frequently. It's incredibly well to do in comparison to other parts of England, and it's got a lot of crypto Catholics.
Hmm.
So it's still got a lot of people who are trying to kind of hold on to the old Catholic traditions, and that will get you done. So if you get found saying the Our Father in Latin, instead of saying it in English, people will say, oh, yeah, Latin, that's a demonic language.
Yeah.
So you are going to be hung because we think that you're a witch. So I think that what it is that it's just slightly still more Catholic, and it's slightly still more Catholic because of its excellent contact with the outside world.
Okay. I do wonder though, being from Essex and being ridiculed for being from Essex on more than one occasion, it's almost a modern day snobbery. It's why it always
Mm-hmm.
gets excluded
Mm-hmm.
because it's kind of people seem to think Essex is modern. Like literally it's like a
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
like your Harlows and things like that. They don't realise we've actually got quite a lot of history going on in our county.
It's something that actually cracks me up because I love Essex because I like history. So there's
Yeah.
always really interesting things that you can see. And, for as someone who lives in London, I can always just kind of nip over
Yeah, we're
and
not
see
far.
something really
We're
cool.
not far.
No.
No.
And it's one of the easiest places for me to go and visit and see things. And yeah, I do think that people think, what people think the past is people think the past is now, but worse.
Hmm.
Right. And so that's like part of the reason why they think, oh, well, even if they understand perhaps that witch persecutions are taking place in the modern period, they say, oh, well, if they're doing it then it must have been worse in the medieval
Mm.
period. That's not how it works, right? If Essex is like this now, it was like this then, but worse. And that's just not how things are. Things change all the time. And this is a phenomenally wealthy and important part of England.
Oh,
And well, it still is, to be honest. It's just that people are like, no, that's the wrong kind of wealthy. Yeah,
yeah,
it's just which
Towie,
always,
Towie. Yeah.
yeah, always kind of cracks me up. But yeah, it's modern strawberry, plain and simple. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, no,
Mm.
I do find it very interesting, and but then again, it's also when a lot of people do when I start talking to them about, and it's not my specialist subject, it's just something I find being a woman, I find it interesting because so many women, and also one of the things I sort of noticed when I was looking into it for that course I did, a lot of the women were either disabled, widowed, or menopausal. So
Mm-hmm.
therefore, they were never going to have babies. And that was all that
Mm-hmm.
was wanted of them. So let's get rid of the
Mm-hmm.
women who are past their sell-by date.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that I sort of mentioned again in the language that I would use. And people going, actually, you've got a point there. When
It's
you look at
absolutely true.
all the women that were targeted by their communities, they were the ones that were of no use to the
Use.
community
Yep.
anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Use
Mm-hmm.
to the community anymore. And so they were the ones that get targeted. And it's same actually when you go there was there's a more modern day witch story, and I can't remember the name of it. It was 19th century in Leon Sea on the south coast near Southend. And she was an older lady. She had been, I think, widowed twice. She'd adopted her husband's children from his first marriage, where he'd been. She's an amazing woman, Sarah Moore, I think her name was. Yet they decided she was a witch. Now, obviously, they couldn't execute her then, but they made up all these stories about her, so it made her life completely. She couldn't live because, and to me, it was, and she adopted her husband's ex late wife's children to sort of care for them and stuff. Yet she wasn't of use anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and you start to see that with a lot of the especially even like 1700s, 1800s, the witch stories of people who are of no perceived use to the community. And I find that really tragic.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's the story of women over time in general is that we tend to relate to women as though we are a collection of body parts, which allows for procreation, and nothing else about us is interesting.
Mm,
And yeah, it's really terrifying and sad. But yeah, you're bang on there.
mm. Thank
And,
you.
it's you're not even the right kind of pretty anymore, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah. Hmm.
yeah.
Mm.
But it's such a fascinating area. Once you get over, almost get over the sensationalism of it. If you start digging into social construct and everything of why it's happened, it's quite. But you see it happening over and over. It's like when you see it on in modern day, almost like social media influencers. There goes my dog. Social media influencers. He's a German Shepherd. Uh,
Ah,
he's on guard duty, I think he thinks.
good boy.
Yeah, yeah. It's my husband's will be coming down to shut him up for me in a minute. Um, but you see it that with Instagrammers, if you don't look the right way, especially as a woman, nobody will follow you, or you've not
Yep.
got a point to
Yep.
make. Or
Hmm.
I mean, I've even seen it with sort of television work that I've gone for. I've been told I'm too old and not pretty enough to get the job, and it's just
That's
like,
TV. Yep.
It's like, okay,
Yep.
I'll do it myself then, but never mind. But it's kind of almost, and when you see sort of presenters once, and again, it's nearly always women, they get to a certain age, they start getting kicked out. It's
Yeah, they
almost
disappear.
they
Mm-hmm.
disappear, and it's almost like modern day witch hunts, but
Mm-hmm.
without the
Mm-hmm.
executions, almost.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's this the idea that women are decorative in
Hmm.
a particular way, and we always must be decorative in addition to everything else that we're used for. And if we're not, then it's simply inconvenient. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Well, I know I'm when I die, I'm going to come back and haunt the producers who said I wasn't pretty enough or young
Get
enough.
'em, girl.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Yes.
I'm going to haunt the
Fantastic.
shit out of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Who's
Well,
pretty now?
yeah, huh? Um, write a show about this. Um, well, we didn't get to do the other blogs I wanted to do because we've been talking for well over an hour. But
Yeah,
would you
oops.
like to come back next year and talk more
I
ghosts?
absolutely will. I'm always down to talk more ghosts. Thank you so
Awesome,
much.
awesome. So, obviously, you can catch Eleanor. Go over to her website. All the links will be on my social medias so that you can find them. So keep an eye out for. She has got a couple of books out. You've got the Once
Mhm.
and Future Sex, and you've got the Middle Ages graphic history. Correct?
That's
Yes,
right.
you can
Hmm.
get hold of those. Just go and check them out. Make sure you check out her podcast as well. I hope you can see what I mean by the way she talks is in a non sort of scary academic, I'm so much cleverer than you. And she just wants to show her love and passion for her
That's right.
period. And if anyone wants to invite her on a ghost hunt, I'm going to be giving your name to a few of the companies I work with, by the way. So you
Oh
never know.
yeah, because I wanna go on a ghost hunt. So
I'll see what I can do. I'll see what I can do. But thank you so much for your time,
an
Eleanor.
absolute
I've
pleasure.
really I could talk to you for hours. I really
I
could.
know.
Um,
Too much fun. Unfortunately, I'll have to
yeah.
come back.
Yeah, please do. Please do. Well, that was the wonderful Dr. Eleanor Janega. I'm sure you agree with me. We'll get her back. We'll get her back for another episode because I think her and I could talk the hind leg off a donkey when it comes to this kind of thing. But for all of those who celebrate, please do have a lovely Christmas and I will see you in the new year. Have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.